Good morning. I'm Tom Foster, Executive Director for Bullion Plaza Museum in Miami, Arizona. And we're here this morning with Megan Parde from the Tonto National Monument. She's the lead interpretive ranger here at Tonto National Monument. And we're here this morning for a hike to the upper ruins. So Megan, tell us a little bit about what we're going to experience here.
Yes, so we're heading up on our upper cliff dwelling trail. This trail is available for visitors to head up on with a guided hike with a reservation. We offer those tours November through April. So it's a little bit cooler, a little bit easier to hike up during the cooler weather months. And this hike is going to be about 3 miles we'll be going up on. It's a little bit rocky along the way, and we have about 600 feet of elevation change ahead of us. So we'll be able to walk through a couple different ecosystems along the way until we get up to our upper cliff dwelling area.
Okay, and also Megan, since we're outside and we are social distancing, I think at this point it would be all right if we take the masks off.
Yes, we're going to do that, and we'll just make sure we're keeping our distance with our small group that we have here.
So thank you, and come join us on this adventure. So Megan, we're just a few hundred yards in from the trail where we started. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about where we're at now and what we're actually seeing.
For sure. You might have noticed, Tom, that we are in a completely different environment than we were just a few moments ago. The plants here are completely different. If you listen closely, I don't know if you'll hear it on camera, but there's some bees that are buzzing in the background, some birds as well. And we do have some pretty large trees that are behind us right here. We have our black walnut tree, which is this darker shaded bark behind us, and also our sycamore, which is the light colored. So Tom, any guesses on why it might be so different out here than what we were seeing before?
I think a little bit of elevation may have changed things just a little bit.
Yeah, so we did go a little bit up in elevation, so a little bit cooler here. We also are in a pretty tight canyon in this area, so definitely a lot more shade than we were seeing before. It keeps it cooler here, just like elevation does, and helps those bigger plants grow. It also allows it to stay more moist here. So, I mean, I can even feel a little bit difference in the air. Definitely a little bit more humid than where we started.
Yeah, so can I. And I can smell the residual sycamore in the canyon as we walked up. You can smell that really nice aroma from the leaves. So,
oh yeah,
it's one of my favorites actually. So.
It's wonderful for sure.
Yeah. So you want to keep going? Ready?
Let's head on. We're going to continue walking through a little bit more riparian area until we head it back out into the desert.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So Megan, we're farther up the trail now. We've removed ourselves from the riparian area, and we're standing here, and behind us are one of the trees of the desert. Could you talk to us something about the saguaros?
Of course we can. So right behind us we have a saguaro cactus. Not quite a tree, but definitely the tallest thing that we have around here in this area. One of the most iconic things in the Sonoran Desert. It's only found in the Sonoran Desert. So our saguaro cactus, you notice there's a couple of arms that are growing off of it. When a saguaro starts to grow, it starts pretty small. It's very slow growing. You'll usually find a small one underneath what's known as a nurse plant or a nurse tree. So it'll get protection from those plants, or underneath even tiny little boulders that are there as well. So it grows very, very slow, and it's really hard to tell how old a saguaro is. Because it's not exactly a tree, it doesn't have tree rings like you would use to date a normal tree. The only way you can really date it is if you either planted it, so you know when it started growing, or you have an old picture where you can compare how much it's grown during those time periods. But on average, it usually takes maybe 50 to 100 years, depending on where you are, to start growing arms.
That's truly amazing.
Yeah, and a lot of those factors come into how much water's in the area, how cold the environment is, and the nutrients that are in the soil too. Like here in Tonto National Monument, we're kind of the northern range of the saguaro. If you drive about 20 minutes north or so, you don't see any of these saguaros. And as you start to explore around, you'll notice some hillsides like behind us where there's a number of them, but some hillsides where it's more shaded, especially in the winter, you're not going to see any saguaros at all.
You know, one of the things really interesting that I've noticed with a lot of the plants in the desert, especially Sonora and lower, they have created themselves so they can gather water when it comes, because it's so hard to find most of the time, most of the year. Saguaros are really neat. They're their own radiator because they have the ribs with the spines on them, so when the water falls, it falls down vertically to the base of the plant instead of being lost. I think that's correct.
Oh yeah, for sure. And they're able to kind of expand as they get more of that water and store it in. This year is definitely not quite as much rain as we had the last couple of years. So if you had visited maybe a year or two ago, you see all these ribs that are kind of like the folds that are in the saguaro. They will actually expand out and they will become less deep as they're holding more of that water.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. A lot to learn. There's just so much here.
Oh, yeah. I learn more every day. So.
Yeah, and so do I, especially when I come out here and listen to the rangers talk and talk about history and plant life. It's great. So what do you think? You want to continue on up the hill?
Let's head up.
Okay, thank you. Megan, we're farther up the trail now, again, still, and we're surrounded by these really neat looking plants with these green leaves.
Yeah.
And really need to know more about those. And also, I've noticed that there's a lot of remnants of fire in here, a lot of burn. So maybe you can tell us what happened here.
For sure. So the plants we're seeing right here are called jojoba. And you might see that name listed on, if you go home, some of your shampoo or cosmetics. It's spelled Jojoba. And it produces a small little nut that grows off of it. And you can get oil out of that nut. And it's very moisturizing. So they would use it. You can also roast it and eat it. Or you could just eat it yourself. It's not my favorite. It's a little bit bitter. So forewarning, if you're trying to eat it, just keep that in mind. But it's a really interesting plant. If you take a look at the leaves, do you notice how they're pointing straight up in the air? That's because out here in the desert where it's very hot, there's not a lot of moisture in the air, not a lot of moisture in the ground that they can suck up. During the hottest part of the day when the sun is very, very high, it makes it so there's less direct sunlight right coming down on the top of them. So less moisture is likely to come out of the leaves.
So it keeps the plant cooler and more moist.
Exactly.
Wow, that's really neat. Yeah, I've heard about these before quite a bit. And there's quite a few surrounding us here, so this is pretty neat to see.
For sure. This is definitely one of our most populous plants that are in the monument here. And you did mention some of these dead, burnt areas that are coming out the top of it. So about just under 2 years ago, in 2019, throughout the Superstition Tonto National Forest and Monument, we had a fire that was called the Woodbury Fire.
I remember.
So that fire, pretty destructive. Well over 120,000 acres were burnt during it, including the area that we're standing right now.
So it came that close.
Exactly. And there was a lot of work that was done by the firefighters. They did a lot of kind of back burning to make sure that the bulk of the fire didn't come. The cliff dwellings that we'll see in a little bit, you'll see some wood that was there. And they didn't want that wood because it's 700 years old.
Right.
They didn't want it to burn like this wood did right here. So they did a lot of wrapping with this material that's kind of like a thick tinfoil type material. But a lot of our plants we did lose. Luckily, some of these plants, like the jojoba, within, I'd say, just a couple weeks after the fire came through, they had already started to kind of pop back out and start to regrow. So some of these plants are more adept, more able to come back after the fire. Sadly, some of our cactus, because they have such thin skin, it takes a lot longer for them to come back.
Yeah, that's amazing. So is there anything else while we're standing here that you can think of that we might want to talk about before we start up the hill towards the upper?
I don't think so. And we are kind of at the base of our wash that we just walked through. So the rest of our hike is going to be that 600 feet of elevation change going switchbacks all the way up.
Okay, so you'll have to allow me to catch my breath the next time we stop to talk.
We can do that because I'm going to need to be able to breathe too while I talk.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And let's
head up.
Move on. So no, we're doing good. It's beautiful today. It's not that hot, no clouds, little wind.
Keep us a little cooler.
A little cooler, yeah. You might notice, everyone, that we've shed some of our heavy clothing coming up, so it's warmed up quite a bit now. Anyway, so we're here at the Upper Ruin. This is a real honor to be able to be up here and with you and listen to some of the history about this place and how really special it is. And also about some of the birds that are flying around up here talking to us at this point. So.
Oh yeah, we're definitely hearing some white-throated swifts in the background today. They came back just a couple weeks ago, so they're starting to nest in the cliffs behind us. And in just a moment, we're gonna head into the back part of our upper cliff dwelling to take a little closer look at some of the details along the way. But just a little information, so like I kind of mentioned before, our upper cliff dwellings, these were built about 700 years ago, occupied for maybe 100, 150 years at max. They were built by a group that we call the Saguaro. We don't really know what they called themselves though. And as we explore through, I'll talk a little bit about some of the building stages and some of the small details. This one is going to be about twice the size of the lower cliff dwelling that you hiked up to with Eric, so a little bit larger.
Neat. Okay, well, I'm ready.
Let's head up.
Okay, let's head up. Yeah, so Megan, this is one of the most interesting rooms actually in the upper dwelling. This has always fascinated me because of some of the things that have happened in the wall, and of course behind us, this original piece of roof. Could you tell us a little bit more?
Of course I can. So I'll point out and I'll make sure not to touch any of our walls or our ceilings as we're going around. It's really important here. We don't want all of our oils on our hands to leave any little destructive oils behind on the wall.
Same thing with museums and touching a lot of the artifacts. So.
Exactly, you understand, Tom.
I do, fully. Yes, ma'am.
So what we have behind me is a partial ceiling, I guess kind of above me as well. So we have these long beams that run across the ceiling. Underneath it, this is a metal pole that's right here, but originally there would have been kind of a wider log that held up part of the ceiling as well. On top of these longer logs, we have some smaller ones running up in the opposite direction. And those are primarily going to be ocotillo, or the ribs of a saguaro, so the inside woody structure.
Mm-hmm.
And you notice the very thick layer of mud on top? That would have allowed folks to hang out on the second story of this building. They could have even built a fire up there.
Yeah.
That thick layer of mud really helps so that it doesn't end up burning the wood that's underneath it. And as you start to look around the cliff dwellings, you might notice areas like this where there's some holes. There's not any wood, but that's an indicator that at one point in time there was a ceiling that ran in that direction.
Those are really fascinating to see those. And then, you know, across from us here on the other side, you know, we can see those holes filled with what's left of the original wooden supports that came across.
Exactly. So this ceiling would have run all the way ahead of us as well.
Yeah, very interesting room. And to have this survive for all these hundreds of years is just amazing.
For certain. And we will head up into the back part of our cave now if you're good with that.
I am good with that. I'm ready. Let's go see more.
Let's go see.
Can't wait. Thank you. So Megan, we've made it. Here we are inside the upper ruin. It's quite a hike, but not bad today. It was a nice day to do this. So here we are. So tell me a little bit about what we see around us and some of the history involved with here.
For certain. So there's a couple of small details that I find really interesting. I hope you do too, Tom. And one of the things I want to point out is that when we were down in the Riparian area, it's a little bit moist down there, a little bit more water. But out here in the Sonoran Desert, it's really hard to find water. So anywhere that you can find water, it's going to attract people, it's going to attract animals.
And water's life.
Exactly. Exactly. So one of the reasons they might have decided to build up here in the cliff dwelling is that we do have this area back here. You might be able to see that it almost looks like a cave in the very back section. And there's even a little green plant that's grown out of it.
Yeah.
So this is a seep area. There's no water in it right now, But there is during time periods, every few years when there's a lot more water
A lot
going
more
on.
water than now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We do have some water that will come out here. And it's possible that when the folks were living here, there could have been even more water that was coming out here. And if that was the case, that's definitely one of the reasons they would have built up here. That close water source, something they can easily maintain life off of. Another thing is we kind of make our way above this green plant area. You might notice all the black that's on the ceiling here. And this is evidence of fires that were existing. So they needed to stay warm, they needed to cook their food, and all of that extra black smoke that was coming up started to stain the ceiling and all of the walls.
Yeah, I can see there's quite a bit here in some areas where the fire was a little more protected. So you have all this coming up and then out, which gives you more charring, more smoke.
Exactly. And right around here, you can tell there wasn't like an easy chimney that was built here.
Yeah.
And most people in the 1300s around the world, chimneys didn't really exist. They were just smoke contained in their room. A lot of people were breathing it in, and that's the case that was here as well. Luckily for them back here though, there was an opening on the front part of the cave, so there would have been light that was coming in. It could have brought some fresh air as well.
So it wasn't too stifling up here then.
I hope not.
Yeah, there you go. So what else do you have? What else can you tell me about?
Yeah, let's go take a closer look at the walls of the upper cliff dwelling over here. So we do have two larger rooms that exist. This is one right here. When folks started to build in this alcove area, they didn't build everything all at once. It was piecemeal. They would add walls on. I like to kind of think of it like your local community. You don't minus some subdivisions, you don't build every single house at the exact same time. So there's a few rooms that were built first. This taller wall that's standing behind me, the back side of it, those were some of the first rooms that were built, and then continued to build on like this large room that's standing here. And as they started to build, they would put doors places, and they would actually then fill in those doors. Maybe they didn't want to have easy access to their neighbor next to them, just like how we redo stuff in our house as well today.
Yeah, it's really interesting the way this faces, which is more or less to the south, a little bit to the east. They would have been able to enjoy sunrise and moonrise, and also, walking up the hill right now, it's getting warm. But right here in the shade, with a little bit of a breeze coming in, this is a natural protected place. So it's quite cool up here.
Oh, for certain. And this area we're standing right now, this was not developed the same way some of the other rooms were. It was left a pretty big open area. Where I'm standing right now, this was only one level. So you would have had a ceiling right about here. So another open area. And then, but still getting some light that was coming in. This could have been a great place to hang out during the day when it was hotter, shaded, cooler, like you said, during the summer.
So, yeah, that's great. So this would have been more of a common area then? This wasn't built?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
So a lot of these other smaller rooms were more living spaces, probably sleeping, some storage, that kind of stuff. And this would have been day-to-day activity lives.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the layout, once you explain it a little bit better, it makes sense on how things are laid out.
And another reason, kind of like that water, if there was water coming back there, would have been easy for everyone to kind of access that together. No one had sole control over it.
Yeah, community water.
Exactly.
Yeah, very nice.
Okay, and I just wanted to point out as well, because like I said, there's a lot of doors that are in here. So we do have kind of an example. This one there's a little bit of restoration work that was done there, but there was a door that was in this area, and we'll see them throughout. Their doors though, they weren't giant doors like we're thinking with actual doors that block them. So the doors are much smaller as you wander around the cliff dwelling. People would probably have had to duck to get through.
Duck a little bit,
But that helps so that you don't get as many, you can kind of control the temperature inside a little bit easier if it's a smaller opening.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, let's go on and take a look at another area, if you would.
That sounds great.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Megan. Well, we're in another part of the upper ruin, and we have another visitor with us this afternoon, a rather vocal one above us, a large black crow.
Yeah, so our ravens have moved in. They are definitely being nice and friendly there in the background. So we'll probably hear them for the rest of the day, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so they've sort of accepted us being here, but they are letting us know that they are here and we're here. So anyway, well, tell us a little bit about where we're standing.
Yeah, so right now we've come back into the front of our upper cliff dwelling. Just behind, you can see that we have a 2-story building that is here. So we have a door with a nice little frame on top. And can you see the hole in just above the door?
Yeah, a small round one, yeah.
Yeah, that would have been right where the ceiling was located.
Oh, okay.
So we would have had first story, and then there's another hole above it where we would have had about the second story of that building.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. I mentioned earlier that this cliff dwelling built about 1300. People left here by about 14 to 1450. One of the ways we're able to get dates like that is by a process called dendrology or tree ring dating.
Okay.
Basically what scientists do is they look at tree rings, and during years where there's a lot of water, the rings are really thick, and in years where there's not very much water, the rings are really thin.
Makes sense, yeah.
So they're able to kind of line dates up, years up. And this building behind me, this wall right here, they were able to get a tree ring date off of
Oh, neat.
from about the mid 1300s.
Okay.
So we know there was a tree that was cut down that was used in this wall for building around that time period.
Amazing.
Now, the reason we don't have very many of those dates in this cliff dwelling is that most of our trees around here were those sycamores and those walnut nuts that we saw earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And those trees grow in areas where it's very moist all year round. Even during drought years, there's still a decent amount of water. So all the rings are basically the same size.
The same size.
Good dates out.
Yeah, yeah, that's a shame. But at least you were able to find that. That's good. So what else? What else would you like to talk about other than our crow?
Yeah, one other thing you might have
Or
noticed-
raven, excuse me. Yeah.
Maybe that's why he's calling. He wants to make sure we know his right name.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
But one other thing you might notice is the clearly not 700-year-old wood that's behind us here, this brace.
Okay.
Now, generally in the Park Service, we like to, especially nowadays, we don't like to rebuild cliff dwellings, but we will do things to help preserve what's currently there. And in the 40s, this wall behind me, it did start to bulge down. It started to, there was a fear that it was going to fall.
Oh.
So what they did is they had their wall and they built another wall on the front of it. So the wall that the brace is holding up right now, it's not an original wall, but it again is starting to fall down.
Oh, okay.
So our brace is holding it up, and we will at some point have some archaeologists that will come up here, some engineers, and they'll remove that wall and put up a partial wall to help hold this area here.
Okay.
And that's generally the type of work that we do, is we're not going to see a bunch of broken rocks on the ground and decide we're going to build a wall there, but we will do things to help hold up what's already there, help keep standing.
Yeah. So it's sort of a conservation, restoration, just enough to keep things from falling down the hillside.
Exactly, and we're lucky enough here because most of this cliff dwelling was built in an alcove that already has that nice natural protection for most of the elements, but not quite as much when you move out from under the rainfall.
Yeah, pretty much opens you up for more exposure. So, yeah. Okay.
Well, I think that's mostly what we have to show you around in our upper cliff dwelling.
Okay. Sounds good.
I hope you enjoyed. And for anyone else that's interested in coming up here, I had mentioned earlier, we do offer tours to our upper cliff dwelling that you need a reservation for November through April. And we book up probably 2 to 3 months in advance for those tours.
Okay.
So for the rest of our 2021 season through the end of April, we're basically full right now.
Basically full, which is good news. I mean, that's really good to hear that you're getting those visitors in.
Yeah, we're excited that everyone wants to come out and see, and hopefully in future years other folks will be able to come out as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. So one of the things on our way back down again that I would like to take a little bit of time is stop and look at some of the plants along the way that we looked at but didn't discuss on the way up. So maybe some of those, you can point those out. I know we covered the jojoba, but there's a lot of other plant life there that maybe we can highlight 2 or 3.
That sounds great. We can do that.
All right, thank you very much. This is great.
Let's get that down.
Okay. So Megan, we're on the downhill back to the visitor center, and the winds come up pretty significantly here. It's a little cool, which is nice walking downhill.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to stop for a minute here and have you talk a little bit about these cholla.
Yeah, so what we're seeing in front of us here is our teddy bear cholla, but definitely not something that you want to go and hug like you would your teddy bear at home. Another name you might have heard them by is the jumping cholla. So these cholla, they will actually break off into little segments, and those little segments have spines that come off of them that are shaped kind of like a fish hook. So if you get close to them, you even just lightly brush across them, they will actually stick to you, and it's going to be really hard to get them out. So that's why they get the jumping cholla name, because some people say if you get even close at them or look at them, they'll come right at you.
Yeah, and if you've ever been attacked by one of these, you know how painful they are and how difficult they are to remove.
Oh yeah.
And again, you can't use your bare hands on these. You have to use a pair of pliers or a knife blade. Because if you use your hands, then you end up with the spines in all of your fingers, as well as wherever it's stuck.
For certain.
Yeah. So.
But those spines, some other animals are utilizing those. So if you take a close look at the teddy bear cholla that we're seeing in front of us, you see all the dead vegetation that's lying in those arms.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of birds like cactus wren that will build nests within the arms so that they can have their little nest, and all those extra spines stop predators from crawling up the base of it and getting to their eggs, and added a little bit more protection to them.
Yeah, it's a pretty ingenious way. They're off the ground basically, and in a spot where the critters can't get to them.
Oh yes.
Which is good.
Yeah, so we saw our cliff dwelling today, home for some of our humans, and now we're going to see some animal homes along the way too. Lots of animals and people able to survive out here in the desert and use what's around them.
Yeah, it's really amazing, especially, the resources that are available. There's so much here. People a lot of times don't realize, what they have in front of them or around them, and how much of a resource the desert can offer them.
You've got to know what you're looking for.
And that's part of the education process, and I've been working on that more and more over the past year or so. So we're learning.
Let's go continue down and see what we can see.
Yes, let's do that. Carry on. Hey, Megan, you've stopped. What are you looking at here?
I'm looking at this plant right here. So this is our so tall. I remember the name because it has a tendency to grow so tall. right?
Perfect.
And this is in actually the asparagus family.
Really?
Yeah, so it's related to, if you've heard of like yucca or agave, same group of plants. And it will grow up, starts down pretty low, and you can see all of the dead leaves down here as they start to fade, get lighter, less green at the bottom. And if you take a real close look, it has serrated little spikes along the edge of each. So tall yucca, very well used by people today and the folks that were living up in the cliff dwelling.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of peels apart at the end, so you could use it and the yucca as well for different weaving products. Some of the yuccas, like you can make soap out of. It actually fuzzes up kind of like soap does along the bottom of the yucca. And one way that you can kind of tell that's in that asparagus family, I know looking at it, it's kind of hard to imagine. But once a year or every few years, out the top of this will grow a stalk that kind of looks like this right here.
Oh, wow.
It is a dark green in color and kind of looks like an asparagus when it's alive. And this will shoot off, and it'll have little seeds that grow out the top of it, and that's how it populates and creates more sotal throughout our area.
Neat.
Hey.
Quite a plant.
For sure. So I'm going to lay this back down, and if we want to head back, we are almost at the end of our trail.
Almost home. This is good.
Okay, let's
Quite
get
an adventure. All right. Megan, this has been great. Really a nice adventure. Beautiful day. The wind wasn't too bad. I've learned a lot. We've been up and back and survived. And I just want to say thank you for all your time and effort and your knowledge. And please come visit us at Bullion Plaza Museum over in Miami when you get a chance.
Oh, I will for sure. And thanks for coming along with us on the hike today, Tom. It's been great.
It's been beautiful. Thank you very much.